You're listening to Around Comics. 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 Comics.
You are listening to Around Comics episode 419. I'm Brian Salazar. With me, as always, is Christopher Niesman and Tom Caters. And we're joined by special guest, our friend, one of the original OG Around Comics friends of the program, Mr. Ande Parks, writer, artist, bon vivant, man of mystery, author. I don't even know. He's got more titles.
Frequenter of haberdasheries.
Yes.
Yeah.
I once sent Andy a text about asking him about fedoras that I wanted to know if there was any value to some fedoras my uncle had left behind.
Oh, I have a vague memory of that. Was that helpful?
Yeah, well, they weren't worth much, but
Okay.
I have one somewhere.
I said they're worthless. Send them to me immediately.
Yeah, I think that was
his uncle had a pretty big melon, and I know that you have trouble finding hats.
I do. Yeah. I am cursed with a 7.5 long oval, so finding vintage hats in that side that are actually made that way, it's hard to come.
People were
mostly
smaller.
It's like the Luca Brasi style.
Right.
I need the Luca Brasi.
Right.
Hit me with that Luca Brasi.
Well, Andy, welcome back. It's always good to see you. I don't want to put a poll on it, but unfortunately, the reason that we called you is because we wanted to talk about one of the.
You are the specter of death, and we wanted to bring you on.
You've ushered another great creator off to the heavens,
Right.
Andy. So, of course, we're talking about Neal Adams, who passed away this past week, and as soon as news broke on that, I think. We all immediately thought, yeah, we need to take time next week and really talk about Neal Adams, what he meant to us as creators. And
I thought you were going to say we all immediately thought we need to get Andy on.
We need to get Andy on.
Yeah, Parks is going to be on.
The specter of death.
But no, we want to take a few minutes and talk about Neal Adams, because he's if there's a Mount Rushmore of comic book creators, you can make a really good case that he should be on it.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I have a trio, and I think the fourth spot could rotate. But Eisner, Kirby, and Adams for me are very defining as far as what American comic books became in the last 50 years or so.
Well, with Neal, it's so. I mean, even talk about him in some sort of retrospective is so difficult. The amount of work that he did, but then you get into everything else as far as creator rights and original art that he fought for, and that's one of the things to me about him that's like he used his position, and in an industry that not to shit on comic books, because I love the comic book industry, but I think as freelancers, a lot of times the last thing a creator is trying to do is stick their neck out for somebody else, because they have to worry about their own job and their own way of life and their own, family and everything else. So for him to sort of, really fight for other creators' rights is just a really important thing, a part of him that maybe doesn't get talked about enough because of his art, but his art obviously is such an amazing thing as well.
I admired that about him. Neal had a thing Phil Hester and I always joke about. We are pretty self-deprecating about our careers and our skills. And we envy guys like Matt Wagner is a good example, a guy who is not a jerk about it, but just Matt will show you a cover, like I'll be in a studio. Look at this cover I did. Isn't it awesome? I would never even, I can't. And Neal was definitely like, Neal had a very confident view of his stance in the industry, and he wasn't afraid to throw that stance around a little if it meant looking out for the little guy.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading. There was an intro in the Neal Adams Batman Volume 1 that DC put out, and it's on Hoopla. So I was looking at it before the show, and the intro is written by Neal, and he's like, the first thing he says is just sort of like, I don't deserve this. Like, I don't know why this book exists. I don't really deserve it. And it's like, well, I mean, but you kind of get the feeling like, I mean, he obviously knew his place in the industry and his legend and all those kind of things, but he was a pretty self-deprecating guy. I mean, he was a pretty humble, although
I don't know if humble is the word.
Yeah, you're right. He wasn't humble, but he was
very self-aware.
Yeah.
And I think in that could have been viewed as a lot of hubris on his part. He knew who he was. But the times that, I mean, we were lucky enough to talk to him a few times on the show and at conventions, over the phone. He always made time for us, if it fit into his schedule. And you're right, he was self-deprecating whenever you would talk with me. He was really well-humored, but you could also tell that, he knew that like his time was valuable, and he always put value. The guy was money oriented. He always put value on things.
He was an adult in an industry where not all creators are very adult-like.
Yes.
Where he's very like,
he didn't devalue himself.
Like the very idea, I mean, of like creators being important, or that they should be considered at all as having value other than like, now you have done this and now you are done and you will be valuable once we need you again. But like, from everything from, pushing for Siegel and Schuster to get credit for Superman, or just like that whole idea that there's any value in creators. When we talk about comics, we talk about the people that make comics, right? Like that's the driving force for us, right? I mean, as a kid, maybe not as much, but like, that whole idea that there's actual people that make these things and that their viewpoint is valuable.
Yeah, in the 60s and 70s, the industry didn't view it that way,
Yeah.
And I think he just by his star power, and Andy, you can probably talk to this. Was Neal Adams? I know that like Kirby, with the bullpen, bullpen bulletins and that whole bullpen thing that Marvel did, they kind of pushed the creators forward a little bit, but I kind of think of Neal Adams as kind of the first like real superstar creator.
Maybe because he came to fame in an era when fandom was really developing. You're starting to see fanzines, and Neal's appeal early on spread because DC was smart enough to stick him on covers on 50 boring books a month. They had the same crap. Sorry, I actually love Kurt Swan, but you've read those stories,
Yeah.
Superman befuddled by a criminal who's turned into a monkey.
Another one of my robots escaped again. Yeah.
But man, you stick a Neal cover on there, and people start to notice that stuff. And then Neal used his clout to say, "All right, enough DC. I really want to see what Marvel can offer me for a while." And so I think he developed maybe for the first time this cult of moving with the artist. Like, okay, what's that guy doing now? That I'm definitely going over there.
Well, we actually we did this as kind of a book of the month way back. This is the Neal Adams collection from X-Men, and it kind of details him coming over to take over this. There's a lot of myth and mythos about that. Of did he go into Stan's office and say, "Give me your worst book, and I'll make it a bestseller." There's all those stories, but I think something that is pretty true is that he went in and it's like, you guys you have to change the way that you're coloring this book. And so we've got to, you have to give me a wider palette. And so, he actually kind of forced Marvel's hand into changing, how they color their books.
Right. Didn't he go in? I think legend has it that he basically doubled their palette because he said, you're not using all these gradations. And the only reason you're not is because the printer said, no.
Well, they had to use tighter. We can get into nerdy, geeky
Right.
things. They had to use a tighter screen. It was more expensive.
Yeah.
It was what it came down to. But you look at the coloring in that book, and for the time, it's absolutely stunning. Which makes it.
I do not want to get into bashing in any way, but the colors on those books that he supervised are so brilliant and simple. And the more recent editions that get kind of, I don't.
The Neal Adams Batman.
Yeah, the revisited ones. I don't enjoy those as much.
He even redrew stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I got into it, but his son and I had a little exchange on Twitter years ago, where I tried to very respectfully say, Neal has evolved as a commercial artist, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. I think he was a more sensitive inker in 1968 for these stories than he is at the moment. I wish he'd just kind of leave him alone. That there's a story that Frazetta used to do that. Frazetta, late in his life, he lived like next to his museum, and they'd have to stop him because he wanted to go over and touch up the paintings, and they're like, "Oh,
they're finished.
They're good. They're good. They're good as they are."
No, he's like, I live here. This is my museum.
Right. It's my freaking painting. Leave me alone.
My art. Like, no.
But yeah, I think what I said at the time was, I wish Neal would just savor those stories for the perfection that they were in their time, and move on to other things. But I get it. You want to revisit, you want to tweak. Ask George Lucas.
Yeah. I wish he'd just kind of like go the John Byrne route. It's like Byrne's like, okay, if Marvel's not going to let me do the X-Men, I'm just going to secretly do it for 20 years.
But Neal was too mercenary for that. Neal moved from one way to monetize his career to another. I mean, like you said, he was a businessman. He
Andy,
in the commercial world for a while, and then he did this, and then late in the later years, he found a way to really monetize conventions, and that became his business model.
Chris, you know that from personal experience.
Wait, yeah, two stories. So I was talking to him, interviewing him at a convention in Chicago, and I've got like 10 minutes with him. So it's the Simon Schuster stuff was happening at that time, so I get his take on that. And then we kind of just talk about the high notes in his career, and not once, not twice, not 3 times, he didn't talk about Batman. He didn't talk about Man-Bat. He didn't talk about his run on the X-Men. But boy, how proud he was of the Nasonex B.
That's just paying the bills, baby. Come on.
Right. He kept going back talking about that Nasonex campaign that they oversaw. So it's like, he was a commercial working artist, and bottom dollar. But the last convention I went to was here in Wisconsin, and they had built out there were tables like shaped almost like a T that were piled with books and merchandise, and they made like this aisle
corridor
down the middle which is how you approached Neal, and the table was like up on like a mini riser. It was really like getting an audience with the king. You walk down this aisle and he's raised above you where you look up, sir. Can you
listen? I appreciate all of it at this point. I just left a job that I was at for almost 28 years at a place that did not value me very much. And let me tell you, if you don't value yourself and you surround yourself with people that don't value you, you start to believe it, And so I really appreciate at this point in my life someone that valued himself and wasn't going to let other people devalue him, because there are lots of people out there willing to do that and take advantage of you, and especially I think in this industry as much as any, that there's been a long history of hucksters that are more than happy to make money off of your work and not give you shit for it. So Say what you will.
One of the best things about Neal was that he was not selfish about that attitude.
Yeah.
I shared on Twitter and Facebook the other day my story, the one time I showed him my work when I was just barely breaking in.
That's why I called you. Is after
And
I read
you
that.
know, I got the I'm bad. What do you want to show me this for? You know, all that, the attitude. But now, and at the time, I was ready for it. I was prepared, and I kissed his ass just enough that we got along fine, and it was great. And I was glad I had that time with him. Now I know so many people who've had that experience, but they had it in person at Continuity, and they kept going back. And now I know how that's been repeated. I don't know Frank Miller, but I know that's his story. I know that's Dennis Cowan's story. I do know Chaikin pretty well. That was Howard's story. Neal would kick your ass 2 or 3 times around the block. And if you kept coming back and showing improvement every time, he would say, all right,
You got something.
a call. And the next thing you know, you had a job drawing a weird Western tale for, he spread it around. He was not selfish about that, caring about your position.
For people out there that don't know what Continuity Studios was, can you kind of explain what that was, kind of its place in comics?
At some point, Neal, I think, had enough of taking what the big two would offer him page-wise, and he's like, I want page rate-wise. He said, I want to be my own boss. So he and Dick Giordano founded a commercial art studio. And if you look, you can Google a number of these things. They did, there's a cassette tape line of commercials they did that are brilliantly drawn. There's a vodka series, Pop Off Vodka. Those are really delightful. And they just started taking commercial art jobs because Neal was like, all right, I've done it. I've told stories for a while. I got kids I need to raise. It's time to make some money in this commercial art world. And eventually they made their own comics too, and they ushered in some other creators, including Michael Golden, who created Bucky O'Hare under that umbrella. And in so doing, in making these comics, Neal started hiring the guys that he knew in comics. Who have I talked to in person? Russ Heath, Chaikin, Rubenstein, Giordano, Terry Austin, Klaus Janson. All those guys were funneled up through that system of coming in, ink a commercial art job or ink a Krusty Bunkers. That was Neal's kind of umbrella. They would throw in and ink something for Marvel. If Gil Kane handed in like breakdowns on a Conan job and they didn't have anybody, they'd get Krusty Bunkers, and 10 guys under Neal's tutelage would ink it. Mm-hmm. And Neal might go through and say, I want this one, this one, this one. You guys can have these, and but he brought in so many guys and shepherded them and taught them how the business worked that there are tons of guys, and I'm not one of them. I just barely had cursory encounters with him. Tons of guys who have this fatherly feeling about it. Sienkiewicz talked about it the other day eloquently. This fatherly feeling about Neal, like he was their daddy in comics who brought them in, taught them, and then shoved them out the door and said, go get it.
That was something, over the last week, just all of the tributes and messages and things that people wrote online about him, for every creator, almost it seemed like in comics had something to say about Neal and what he had done for them, or amazing encounters and just all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's pretty impressive. I think that's a huge part of somebody's value, right? Like what people say at the end of the day,
right?
Who you've helped, who you've done things for. It's something that whose lives you touched, outside of just how many fans that he's over the decades that he's touched. But it's just like, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, if you know anything about the continuity structure, I mean, his wife was there, sons around. He had a very familial attitude about things, I think, and that stretched out into comics in general.
Yeah, he's a generational creator in comics, because I think the people that were buying Neal Adams stuff off the shelf at the time, obviously had a deep connection to him. I think for like me and Sal, Adams was he even doing really anything at that point whenever we were buying comics. My first experience with Neal Adams was reading those X-Men run that he did in reprints. And
Yeah.
so I think by by mid 80s, was he really even working in the industry much?
That might have been around the time that his continuity line came out with Ms. Mystic and oh boy, what do people like to make fun of? The Escape Man book, stuff like that. Around that time. I'm like you. I got into him in back issues. Batman 243 was the first one. It's the cover is him in like a judo battle with another guy. And that comic, I just, there's a Jack Kirby comic that did this for me, and then there's that Neal comic. Just blew my mind about what was possible on that page. And if you compare, somebody did it on Twitter last week. They posted an X-Men page by like Werner Roth or one of those guys from like a year before Neal took over. Same kind of, it's like the Sphinx, and it's the same. It's like the Sphinx origin story.
Yeah.
And then posted Neal's version. It's mind blowing. It's just, it's kind of standard old cartooning versus this cinematic, semi-realistic, but not boring.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Stuff.
Everybody, it's like that was one of the things that kind of drove me a little crazy over the last week or so. Is just like people, he ushered in this realistic, take, and it's like, man, I understand why people say that, but it wasn't realistic. Like it was, it didn't look like somebody was drawn from photographs.
It was dramatic.
No.
It was dramatic. Yes.
Right. We know guys. We could name guys who draw from reference, and it looks it. I think my favorite quote about Neal is Neal draws people just the way they would look if they looked that way.
That's awesome.
They're realistic, but it's also it's the dynamism of
they're dynamic and dramatic, and the lighting, and
he adds a muscle here or there, on occasion to make it look right. But his characters always looked really sculpted to me, right?
There's just I was gonna hands.
Yes.
I don't know if another artist draws hands as much or uses hands in his layouts as much as Neal did. Like that's one of hands and feet. Those are the things that are really tough to draw, right? Like ask Rob Liefeld. The joke of Liefeld not ever drawing feet on a character, which is not true, but it's hard to draw hands and feet. And Neal, like, there's not a page that goes by that he doesn't have hands coming at you, and they're beautifully drawn hands and feet, and constantly feet are coming at you, kicking at you, and flying at you, and it's just like, he had no fear of that. He could draw them as good as anybody.
Dick Giordano once told me when he was looking at my stuff that an artist who can draw hands and faces well will get work every time over the artist who draws everything okay. But man, if you can come in like Neal for that close up,
right?
And if you can draw these things coming at you, you can get away with a lot.
Yeah. And there's just, you look at it, even back in his Batman stuff, is just like constantly the hands, fingers, they're in every panel almost. It's
that's my favorite Neal page.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Hands
and feet right there.
I mean, that's a dynamic. That's the beast falling out of a window.
That's not. I mean, like I said, I understand why people say realistic, because
Chris,
it was.
Before you put that away, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Can you show me the first page of X-Men? Because it says a lot, I think.
Oh, the first page?
Yeah, his first page of X-Men.
The
angel flying in.
Yeah. It's. I mean, that's just.
If you're reading Marvel comics, you never saw anything like that before. What the hell?
Yeah. It was. And I came into X-Men. Paul Smith, worked my way immediately back into the Byrne stuff. and then I think I sought out the Neal Adams stuff. So I mean, those are like if you were to line up the first three artists that I really followed in comics, it was Paul Smith, and then Byrne, and then Adams. And
I didn't know you're a big Paul Smith guy. I love that. He didn't get enough credit, I don't think.
Oh, that was we had Byrne
We've
on the
talked.
show way back, and I think we asked him when did you realize that the X-Men had become this giant book, and he said right after Paul Smith took over.
I think Green Arrow, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow was the stuff that I first went back to because I was a big Green Lantern fan, and yeah, that was. But honestly, I think the first thing I remember was the Muhammad Ali, the Superman Muhammad Ali. I was like, well, because I grew up a big boxing fan. My dad was a huge boxing fan. I grew up watching boxing, and Ali was, Ali, and him fighting Superman was something that when I came to know that existed, I was like, oh, I gotta check that out, and then it was, I was like, who is this guy? Who is Neal Adams? I don't even know I didn't really know at that point who he was. But then going back and seeing all that stuff, and then the Batman was, it's still like one of the best versions of Batman. His Batman is just defining of that character.
Sure. It's speaking of the Ali comic, that was one where I got to see a little bit of his disdain for the industry. We were the same time that I had interviewed him, we were walking to his table as we were starting, and we walked past the original art dealer that has the big splash page. Of Ali and Superman.
Albert Moy has the Superman and Ali shaking hands at the end. He had it for years.
That is okay. Well, we're walking past that booth, and I saw Neal look at it, and he goes, "Oh, hey." And he looks, and then he sees the price posted on it at $20,000.
Right.
And I just saw him, just for a second, you could see a fire. And his eyes like, ugh. It was, he was.
Neal was maybe the first guy in comics who, with the coloring, I don't like the new coloring. But Neal saw that happen a lot, and I think he looked into laws about, is there any way the original artist can be compensated? And
get a
I think
percentage.
New York, whoever said not going to happen.
Yeah,
and I don't think Neal had a claim that his stuff was stolen. It just Inker sold it cheap, or he sold it cheap, and then we've seen what happens. It's insane.
Yep, exactly.
But Neal. Like Phil Hester pointed out on Twitter the other day, Neal kind of created the whole industry because artists weren't getting their pages back until Neal said, "Screw you! I'm not signing this thing on the back of my check that says you own all this. I'm not doing it."
Yeah, there was a few years ago. I think for talking about how different generations look at him. This is after he's obviously done all of his big work, and I think there's a whole generation of comic book fans that just kind of know him as crazy Hollow Earth guy. And if you're going to talk about the guy's life and kind of his very public image that was there. I mean, that was part of it. And
let's be honest,
really shit on him about it.
Hollow Earth is pretty quaint. In
this day
and age, it's pretty quaint and cute. In
2006, it caught people off guard. It's way below Q now. So
nowadays it's like, oh, that's adorable. I love that's great. But
I wish that's all we were dealing with. Controversies of people.
I don't know how many pages of it he actually did. He was going to produce this Two Guys in a Bar about two guys expanding on these. No pun intended. Expanding, because it was expanding Earth.
Expanding Earth.
And I don't know how many pages of it he drew. You can find some of them. It's literally two guys in a bar, one explaining all that stuff to another. I wanted to say, I've been telling my wife stories about Neal because his death really hit me hard. I think largely in part, that's a dumb phrase. Largely because he was
how's that writing gig going?
rough. What is it, Alec? To quote Alec Baldwin, I used to be a writer. It's a tough racket. But largely because Neal was still vibrant. He could still make a kick-ass drawing. You could still go to Facebook and see him hawking his stuff. There was no 10-year period where like, oh, Neal's off in his pasture somewhere.
Right.
So it hurts. Anyway, I've been telling her stories about Neal, and she said, wow, Neal seems to break the mold of all your heroes who were these brilliant, self-destructive assholes. And I said, well, I wouldn't say Neal was self-destructive, but he had a streak. He would tell you the truth. He wouldn't suffer a fool. I remember one time I went to talk to him. He and I were like, he kind of knew who I was. Like, he's like, do you draw Green Arrow now or something? I said, yeah, I did for a while. And I'm sure he must have looked at our stuff and thought, what children.
Yeah, I
would go over to his table.
It's like you and Phil are not out of the Neal Adams illustrative school.
No, but I think artists, and I think this applies to other artistic endeavors, writing or whatever. I think you tend to really idolize the people who do things that are magical to you, which are the things you cannot do easily. And I cannot draw. I could try for 100 years. I can't draw like Neal Adams. What I can do is bold and graphic and simple. And so to me, his work just it's magic. I can't relate to it. And so that's one of the reasons he's such a hero to me. But I would go to talk to him in San Diego for a little bit and then chat. And actually I have 2 Tarzan roughs hanging in my studio here.
Wow.
And I told him that. And after a glimmer of like, he said, would you send me those scans so I can put it, he used my scans for his Savage sketchbooks that he would sell at shows and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
But yeah, once I was talking to him, I said, oh, I love Giordano, especially on the Superman Muhammad Ali. And Neal was like, yeah, Dick did pretty good. And I was like, don't start on Dick, you son of a bitch. But I get it. He was his own best inker, and he knew that, and he thought everybody else probably lost a little subtlety here or there. I like Dick. I like Tom Palmer a lot, but I get it.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Adams work?
I'm like Sal. The Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff has probably made the biggest impact on me. Because I had never read any socially conscious comics before. I'm not, by the way, I am an old man, but I'm not old enough that I was buying these off the rack. I was discovering all these in the...
I wasn't talking about you earlier.
I discovered all these in the 70s as I could find them in back issue. And I think I got the Christ issue first, which is actually his last issue. And I was blown away. Like, oh my God, it was poignant and moving, and it said something that needed to be said. I was like, damn.
Just the idea, like, we're going to take these 2 guys and kind of put them on the road. Like, it was a road picture, it was like with these 2 superheroes that were friends.
And then stick one of the Guardians with them as this kind of crusty old presence.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it was just like, that was the coolest thing to me. Like the wildest thing you could do with a superhero comic at the time. Yeah. When like I said, it was the 80s when I was reading those comics. It maybe even later than that by the time I ever, I kind of got a look at them, but yeah, it was just like, oh, this is such a different take on superheroes. Like, what, these dudes are just going to like travel around and see the world. It was like, it was, film. Yeah, it was a hangout movie kind of thing, or it's just like, wow.
And now I hate, it's and Denny is gone now too, so so but when you guys took over Green Arrow, is there any, do you look at your heroes and say, oh my gosh, I'm drawing the same book that that some of my artistic heroes
I think I don't know how much we referenced it, except maybe how to draw the hat, because the hat is tricky and made it look easy. I was much more aware of that than Phil. Phil loves Neal, but he's more of a Toth, Kriegstein kind of graphic guy.
Yeah.
But I was very aware that I was drawing this book that my hero had defined in my own eyes, and one of the many reasons that book, like I look at the first issue now and I'm like, oh my God, how did we even do it? Because there was so much pressure. Like Phil and I had been working at DC and working regular, but not together and not on a book that had Kevin Smith writing and a relaunch of a character that hadn't been around for a while.
That book was a big deal. Like before it came out, it was a big deal.
So I mean, I remember sitting at the board like, shit, this is a big deal. But yeah, it was very surreal to be. And you know what's the most surreal is that people come up to me now, because that book is like 20 years old. I think maybe the first issue or close to it.
Yeah.
People come up to me now and they say, the Green Arrow artist and the reason I like and I'm like, oh, that's so kind. And I know how silly it is because Neal's books are sitting there like, what are you talking about?
Every generation, man.
Yeah.
Different.
I got a little Ande Parks.
Oh, look at that.
Oh.
Yeah, Phil and I established the pattern that if people bring us a hardcover, we sketch in it. So
I still have my
February
Phil Hester
2001.
bathroom sketch, the greatest con sketch of in history. He drew me Captain America while he was taking a piss. That will never
in the Marriott lobby or Hyatt.
In the Hyatt, that was in the Hyatt outside of Knuckles.
Yeah,
that was at the Hyatt.
Yeah,
I was hanging out with some people at Planet Comic-Con a couple of weeks ago, and they couldn't remember what Knuckles was called. They were calling it Fisters. I was like, no.
The Shocker. It was the Shocker. No.
How was it? How was it getting back into con life?
It was really good. It was nerve-wracking. I'm not used to being around people without a mask, and so I would like wear. If I knew I was going to be in an elevator or if there were a crowd of people at my table, I would put my mask on. But I didn't have it on all the time, and it's nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm as boosted as you can be, and I don't want to get it. I just don't want it. It's so. I mean, eventually, I think over the years, we'll probably all get it eventually, but you want to avoid it as long as you can for the strains to get less and less. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but I came out healthy, and it was great. Had dinners with Howard Chaykin, and I got to meet Garth Ennis. And yeah, it was fun. Phil and I hung out. Very good. That reminds me, it's a tangent, but because Howard and I talked about this a little bit. This was before Neal passed, but we actually ended up talking about Neal one night because Howard was one of those guys who was kind of a mentor, or Neal was a mentor to him. I always think it's amusing to think about guys like, it's not fair, but like Shelley Moldoff, let's say. A guy who is a decent cartoonist. He could tell an efficient story. He got regular work, doing fine. And Neal comes along and
why aren't you this?
Changes like boom, like changes the expectations. And a little bit unfairly because Neal, he made a lot of comics in a certain period there. But like he couldn't keep up on Avengers, and so there had to be they had to bring in Buscema, and he had trouble keeping up because I think at times he knew, like he inked that Joker story himself because he knew this is the Neal Adams Batman Joker story, and it's not getting fucked up by anybody, and I'm inking it. So he viewed jobs as milestones, I think, and people now who like Brian Hitch or any of these kind of dynamic but realistic guys, that came out of Neal. And I kind of feel sometimes for those guys who are just going on doing their work, like, oh, come on, really?
I barely hit the bar before you. Now you just fucking threw it over my head. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective of, a guy like that. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a handful of those dudes, right? That just come in and sort of reset the paradigm, and all of a sudden, fuck, okay,
Yeah.
now
Oh,
what?
no.
But do you chase that? Yeah, if you, like you said, it's one of those things where how do you can't replicate it. I mean,
Right.
it's like how many guys tried to be Neal Adams after that and failed, and
Oh.
some made it, some did
Yeah.
it, but like, yeah, it's such a weird, crazy thing. With you have those dudes that tent pole all of a sudden. Sorry,
Yeah.
so you're gonna have to raise the bar here.
Right.
It's a new thing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny we were talking about, and at the time, especially whenever Adams is coming in, there were house styles, right? We're aware of that in that X-Men collection. Before, I forget the artist you mentioned earlier that was before him, but the one,
like Werner Roth, the guy who came before.
right before Roth, it was a guy named Barry Smith.
Yeah.
That hack.
Not yet formed. Yeah.
Right. And so I think there were a lot of those guys that were just doing a house style, and then Sienkiewicz, what he was doing was like his Moon Knight stuff. And, I love that, I think that Neal Adams was one of those artists that kind of helped open the door for people that had a style that wasn't the house style.
Yeah.
Right.
Bill has a very healthy attitude about Neal. Bill acknowledges that early on he was doing Neal, and then he became tight with Neal, and Neal encouraged him to push further and expand and grow in different directions. And by the time he got to Electro Assassin, he's totally his own artist and expanding out in crazy ways.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding. He took that advice to heart. Has anybody expanded, further than Sienkiewicz in comics? Like, wow.
And his Neal Adams was good.
Really good. Yeah.
I mean, he was always awesome. But yeah, you look at, you take,
because he didn't trace him. He drew like him, but he didn't trace him.
Yeah. Well,
like a guy like Rich Buckler did on occasion. Yeah.
He's just that good. And you look at the Moon Knight stuff, which is great, and then you take that jump to like New Mutants, and then Electro Assassin. It's like, whoa.
I was going to ask you guys, covers, comic book covers, obviously, I mean, that's always been an important thing about comics, and, it sells the comic, it's on the shelf, it's the first thing people see. But man, Neal's covers, to me, it was like, do you feel like such a shift? Because his covers are amazing. There's covers of his that are just, the comic might be crap, but his covers,
comics, baby.
Holy shit. They're just, but was he one of the first guys that really just, created that almost of like, because now it's like they'll hire, they'll have somebody do the cover and somebody completely else, is doing the interiors just to sell the book. Do you think that was part of that, growth of, or I don't know if it growth, evolution,
the star cover artist?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm looking online now, and just some of, here's just a Batman, I don't even know what, 229, and it's just fuck, it's a great cover. It's I don't even know what it's trying, it's not like it's even anything spectacular as far as the content, but it's just the way he's, and there's there's 7 hands on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, there's seven hands on this cover.
More hands per cover.
But it's just amazing. It's awesome.
It's a good point. He wasn't the first guy to do those kind of dynamic, bold symbol covers, but he might have been the first kind of hired gun to like come in here and brighten up our Jimmy Olsen line for a few months because we're dying over here.
Yeah.
But he had to move the needle, right? I mean, you couldn't resist some of those covers.
Oh man,
I posted some so Heritage, the auction site, is a great resource for scans. If you create an account, you can go to their backlog of sales and have access to these incredible high-res scans. And I just searched Neal Adams cover there last week and just found Superman covers that are so dynamic. Superman busting a statue, and the inside story, I've seen the inside story. It's okay.
Yeah.
And it ain't like the cover. And
right.
There's another one is Superman holding up a mask like this, way up in the foreground. And and Superman's been exposed as a criminal. They're just irresistible. They also were really colored well, supervised by Jack Adler, who I think was Howard Stern's cousin, I think is what Howard says, who had this really cool technique of using a plate of gray layered in with the colors to give you a really neat kind of deep effect. Rich, but without going overboard on, saturated colors and so on.
Here's just some.
Oh, we can show things. Neat.
Yeah. I mean, some of this stuff is just.
Yeah. A lot of House of Mystery, some cool House of Mystery ones.
Yeah.
This is the one. I mean, I don't even know who this guy is. The Mad Men. But look at 7 hands. Look at all these hands. He's just drawing fucking hands, I mean, this is an awesome cover. I don't even know what the story's about.
Yeah.
But
Sal, can you show that famous Superman chain busting?
Oh, yeah.
It's right up there in the upper left.
This one, right?
No.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So iconic. And one of Neal's simpler covers, just an irresistible design. And I think Neal always bitched that they told him they had to put the lettering down below. So they needed he had to stretch that left leg,
A little
he
bit.
wasn't comfortable with.
Yeah.
But man, it's one of the most iconic Superman covers ever.
My favorite is the X-Men. If you want to grab that one, the one with the living Pharaoh.
Oh yeah.
The unused one or the published one?
I love the unused one,
I do too.
which had the X-Men were kind of nailed to the.
You destroyed the logo too much; they couldn't have it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're both brilliant, dynamic covers, but yeah, I love the unused one. But yeah, that he would use the titles and typography of the covers that way. It was amazing.
I think you just showed one of his variants on the classic Joker cover. I think that sold a year or two ago for, I think maybe $500,000. You've got the original there in the second.
Is that what killed
this one?
Third one down is black and white image of the original art. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
That's Heritage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Look at
old
that.
Heritage.
Look at that.
So good.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, and whoever
amazing.
bought it was missing a word caption still. What a ripoff.
Even this, look at, I mean, a phone booth, he's on the phone, it explodes. I mean, there's such a story in just that alone. And man, yeah, just some pretty amazing. Batman tied to the mast of a ship with Two-Face. I don't know why. I want to read it though. I want to find out why. Here's some House of Mystery.
We almost got to this earlier. I didn't actually say it, but Neal had, he was a bigger than life guy, and again didn't suffer fools. But can you imagine? I think he signed to do the Ben Casey strip. He was barely able to sign the contracts because he was just over 21. He's 21 in 2 months. I don't know if you've seen their first year of Ben Casey, but it's freaking remarkable. And really popped versus the other strips at the time. Can you imagine what it's like to be that good when you're 21?
No.
It's crazy.
I'm mediocre at a couple things at 9.
Here's some Ben Casey.
And so this is around Neal. Oh, show that one in color there where he did the trick head panel.
Oh wow, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, he did that in Dead Man too, where he did the mystery head that crosses over in several panels. He was blowing people's minds, and he's 21, 22 years old.
That's crazy.
So Neal was an illustrator for kind of the Mad Men era of advertising art in New York. He was working for Johnston and Cushing. Is that what they were called? He and Stan Drake cranking out these amazing commercial jobs, photo reference, but lively and beautifully inked, and making a really good living. And I always thought it was interesting that Neal had that lifestyle and had a comic strip, which was his, which for the guys maybe a little before his time in the 50s, that was the goal. You got a comic strip and you wrote it out, man. Stan Drake, Alex Raymond, you get a strip, that's it. You got the highlight. And Neal had this passion to do comics, and he was like, "Screw this." And he went to DC, and they treated him like shit. They said, "Here's a Jerry Lewis job, kid. Fuck off for
Mhm.
And he did it, and he kept pushing until they gave him covers, and kept pushing until they gave him Brave and Bold, because he had a
Unreal.
passion for comics. God bless him.
Yeah, and got to a point that he could really dictate things.
Yeah.
He had such command of light and dark, and just, oh man, just
He
to
did
being
some,
able to express light like
He
that.
did some Bob Hope stories.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
He had
looking
a couple
at
Archie jobs too, and I've read interviews where he said Archie is one of the hardest things he ever had to draw, because when you're drawing 100 lines, you can cheat a little bit. But when you have to draw a figure in 4 lines,
It's like,
they have to be exactly right.
Well, you were
I gotta
talking
get it
earlier.
right.
You were talking earlier about admiring what you can't do. It's kind of like they say all actors want to be sports heroes, and all professional athletes want to be actors. Do you think that Neal would look at someone like a Darwin Cook or a Toth or whoever, someone that just has that economy of line, and kind of marvel at it?
It's interesting. I'm not sure, because when I showed him my work that time, this would have been about 91, 92. I went to my first convention in New York. It got so crowded that the fire marshal shut down the hotel for a while because too many people in it. But I showed my stuff to Neal, and I had samples. So trying to get work at that time, you kind of had to be a West Coast style. And I had samples over Leonardi, JR, a few others that I don't remember, maybe John Bogdanov. And Neal looked at these samples, and he was kind of nonplussed. He was like, I can't really tell. This stuff is bold and graphic, and it's fine. You can make nice lines, but it's not. I can't tell if you can draw. I can't relate to it because it's not illustrative. So get some other samples and come see me. And I was like, well, shit. So I'll name the name. I didn't name the name on Twitter. I'll name the name here. I said, well, I know Clark Hawbaker, who is a artist in the Neal School. Mm-hmm. I could get some of his samples. He said, oh, that's good. He traces me all the time. That'll work. And that may not be fair. I don't think Clark traced anybody, but he was in the Neal School. But anyway, Neal can relate. He wanted to see me doing more illustrative stuff so he could judge and then kind of shepherd me forward.
Very cool.
Look at this hand. Look at this fucking Superman hand. That is Superman's hand right there. Nobody,
Great.
I don't know. That's fair. I think that's kind of fair, though. Honestly, I mean, in some ways, it's like, well, how do I judge something that I don't understand necessarily, or I don't,
I love that cover you're showing so much.
Look at that.
That just rocked my world when I saw that cover on the stand or in a back issue.
Yeah.
Because nothing looked like that at the time. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of changed it. It's after Neal Adams makes his dent in the industry. I mean, he kind of like defined what comic books look like. Yeah, those covers were so. I mean, they're iconic.
I was getting sad the other day about there not being more Neal Adams runs. There's maybe 5 classic.
He didn't do a lot. He didn't do a lot.
On the other hand, if you're into illustration, he made tons of drawings. There's still tons of Neal Adams drawings that I haven't seen. So maybe not as many complete stories as I would like. Mm-hmm. But if you just enjoy marveling at the artwork, he made a lot of drawings.
Yeah. Oh, and I will say one great Neal Adams interaction we had was at New York Comic Con. And we were working with a Hero Initiative and selling sketches and auction, silent auction at our table. And he did 2 or 3 just beautiful 8x10 sketches. I think he did a Man Bat and a Green Arrow, and I want to say there was another one that he did, maybe like a Hawkman or something like that. and was totally giving of his time and talents because it was going to benefit Hero.
Somebody told the story the other day about him being in San Diego. Might have been Mark Vanier, I'm not sure. Anyway, he's at San Diego, and he's got his booth, and he's got some stuff spread out. And people are kind of slow to recognize that it's Neal Adams over there in Artist Alley, whatever. But by the end of the day, he's got a big line of people dying for a sketch. And Neal said he went away for a while, came back to his table, sees a big line. He says, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll go to my hotel. It's across the street, down on block. I'll clear it with the hotel people. I'll sit in the lobby. Somebody bring food. Somebody bring something to drink. I'll take care of y'all. It'll take some time, but we'll sit there all night and I'll just make sketches, for whoever needs them.
Jeez.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
One
He's
of a
a
kind.
legend.
One of a
He's
kind.
a legend.
Yeah.
It's he was awesome.
So in my studio, I have. Sal, is it too much to ask for you to show these? Can you? They're on my Twitter, but that could take a while.
I can find it. Go, keep talking. I'll.
So I have 3 originals in my studio. I was lucky enough.
There's a Kirby Thor.
Oh yeah, I mean no, three Neal originals.
Oh, Neal originals.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did you
I was
post
lucky
them?
enough over a space of years to first I got one Tarzan pencil rough. I don't know if you guys have seen the Tarzan paintings that he did, book cover paintings.
Yeah.
Really phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I got one pencil rough, and like 3 years later, a different version of the same cover came up. And I was like, oh shit. Well, there's no way I'm not getting that. So it was at auction and I had to bid until I got it. So I have 2 versions of the same cover. Are you having any luck, Sal?
Yep. Here we go.
Yes. So that's version A. And then I assume the editor or the art director said, that's great, but we can't have our hero not facing the reader. So he did version B, which is very similar to the painted cover. And it cracks me up that he didn't redraw the flaming guy because he already drew him perfectly in the other version. So he'll just artograph those together when he does the finished product. Yeah. He just wanted it. Yeah. And there's
the finished product.
Oh, how
so
cool.
great. So I have those. And there are I don't think anybody ever used a pencil like Neal. I marvel at them every day. And then I have a Brave and Bold page from early in his Batman career that Phil Hester, we were at a show, I don't know, 25 years ago. And Phil was roaming around the dealer's room and he sees this page for sale for $100. And he realized it was Neal Adams. He said, yeah, I need that. Give me that. And then he knew that he cannot come back to my table and be the guy who showed me, look what I just got for $100.
That shit ends friendships.
Because he knew I was a bigger Neal fan than he.
Mm-hmm.
So he came back to my table and gifted it to me.
Oh, man.
And so I have that on my wall too, which is a lovely page and also a reminder of my great friendship with Phil.
Can I just, on this particular sketch, I love the fact that this sword is here. Like it's like I'm going to throw this in to show that he dropped the sword because he's on fire and being lifted over this guy's head.
Right.
It's just like, who thinks of that? Like that's, and there it is. There's, in the finished product, like, yep, it's still there. It's a little further back, but
yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
Go back to the middle one. I love that he grabbed whatever paper was on hand.
Yeah. What is this?
Right. And so I actually know this cover. There's a sketch for another cover at the bottom of this drawing.
Yeah, what is that? Aquaman?
And so what I imagine is he's working on this rough. He's probably got his autograph machine out and he's working away on this. And then an editor calls and says, hey, Neal, I need a cover. I think it's called Amazing Adventure, Amazing Action or some magazine. He said, and he wrote, I need a montage, World War II caveman, ice station zebra. And he drew a little layout, just a tiny layout, upside down on this lawyer stationery he had sitting around.
Weston E. Edwards. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
That's
But
awesome.
And
yeah,
now
I mean,
it's hanging
Neal did
in-
not expect this to be a treasured work of art hanging on my studio wall.
It was just a tool,
40
right?
years
It was
later.
just a.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Lots of Neal.
Oh, there's the gift from Phil.
This one?
The black and white. Yep.
Oh wow.
Dude.
$100.
$100.
Batman and Creeper.
Oh, with the creeper?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
It's a neat. So that job is actually, I've read where Neal said,
Brave and the Bold, number 80. Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
Neal said, I don't know what I was doing with storytelling on that issue. There's some pages that don't make any sense to me. Because he was pushing the boundaries a little and he had to use arrows to guide you. But this page is pretty clear and innovative. And I like the way he kind of bridges the bottom two panels in a way that they're kind of the same action, but they also are a little progression.
It's this here, right? This little effect. You have it here and then you have it here and it kind of, and you have the girder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
girder
really-
carries over.
Yeah. But that's interesting. This is interesting to me. This little effect. He does this little spiky
Yeah.
move, but it's the same effect here. It kind of ties.
Neal was always big. He was bigger than most artists on speed lines, action lines, and that flow.
Yeah, everything
that
was
they created.
moving.
This is a little before Dick figured out how to ink Neal. It's not quite as subtle as Dick would get later, but it's still very effective.
I like how he has the little next moment. Just a little pause there. He wanted an extra pause. That's awesome.
Remember, in this era, he was taking Bob Haney. Maybe wrote this.
Mhm.
Pretty traditional scripts, and Neal would tweak it here and there.
This is not
He'd make it a scene at night, or he'd make the instead of Batman standing around talking to the commissioner, he'd be lurking in the corner talking to him. Just tweaking everything to turn Batman into what he thought he should be.
Yeah, it's not Marvel style.
Right.
Yeah.
Good sound effects too. Sunk. That's a great sound effect right there. Sunk. I love that's the thing. The only page of original art that I have that has lettering on it is a Dylan Preacher page, and it's why I love it so much, because it's like, well, it's Ennis and Dylan, you know what I mean? Like without the words, it's half the freaking thing, but yeah, it's just
in this era. This is a history lesson, probably boring to everybody, but in these days, the letterer would. So Neal had to pencil this, and then take it to the office, and then went off to the letterer for a while, and then he didn't ink it until the letters were complete. It wasn't until much later that you would start inking, and then they'd apply the letters after your inks.
Oh, okay. So the sound effects were they were probably placed there by the letterer, and then
Neal might have indicated those in the pencils, which had been erased. But yeah, he would hand in the pencils. They would go after the letterer, and then when he got the boards back, they would have the panels line, the borders done, and the sound effects and the lettering, and then you inked around them.
Man, that is.
And a lot of old pages, you'll see editorial blue pencil where the inks crash into the word balloon a little bit. They got to clean that up. And of course, they didn't give a shit, so they got like a $200,000 now piece of artwork, and there's a big old fucking blue pencil line, during to the middle of the page, like fix this.
Oh yeah, I've my most treasured page has been, corners ripped off of it and cut with a knife. It's a burn page, and it's been butchered up pretty bad.
This Batman has 2 holes on the top because I'm sure that's how it fit into their scanning machine, or what he was scanning was photography.
Yeah, I mean it is.
Oh, you keep them all the same.
It's commercial art, man.
Yeah,
They
weren't in the business of making originals. They were making freaking comics.
Yep.
Is there a Neal? Are there any Neal artist editions?
No. Oh, that's not true. I have one. It's for a story called Thrill Kill. It's based on the where's that guy from? Was it Dallas, the shooter in the water tower or whatever?
Whitman or Whitmire.
Sounds right. They kind of became Bogdanovich's first movie. Now I'm blanking on the name of it. Anyway, Neal did a story called Thrill Kill about a killer up on top of a building.
Charles Whitmore.
And he's got a rifle and he's shooting. It's a horrible, depressing, gory story, but beautifully drawn by Neal and incredible inking. And they did a mini, because the story's only, I don't know, 12 pages. They did a mini portfolio thing with full-size art. It's good scans.
Charles Whitman.
Yeah.
Let's see, what would have been Bogdanovich?
His first movie with Boris Karloff.
Oh God, I should know this.
It's something like Bullets or terrible. I just saw it recently too.
That's Neal, right?
Yeah. Is it Neal or Garcia? I think it's Neal. It's either Neal or Garcia Lopez. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's my Green Lantern pint glass.
Right. Are you finding this out? Because it made me.
I'm looking. Yeah. I'm targets.
Thank you.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an AC episode if there wasn't a dramatic pause of a Google search.
Search.
I just watched a Karloff documentary on Shudder the other night. It was okay. It was not bad. Except it drove me nuts that in the intro and throughout the film they used like the shittiest fucking art as like backgrounds. I'm like, as many people have drawn Karloff as every character. Really, you couldn't get someone other than this whoever shitty fucking artist you got.
Yeah.
Speaking of films, Neal he was brilliant about making continuity available to films and commercials as a way to look, if you figure out how to shoot this on the day, it's going to cost you a fortune. Give my studio $50,000 and we'll lay it out beautifully. We'll do beautiful storyboards for you and we'll figure out everything you need to know. You get to shooting, it's simple as pie. It's much cheaper to hire us than to wing it.
Much more efficient, right?
Yeah.
And that's how everybody does it now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
James
do
Brown.
anything
James
without
Brown
it.
was in this movie. Oh, no. Different James Brown. Sorry.
The story of that movie is funny. I know we're talking about Neal, but so Corman told Bogdanovich, I hired Karloff to do a shitty movie and we're not going to make it. But I got like 8 minutes of Karloff footage and I need you to we can't throw the money away. So I need you to turn that into a movie.
Sounds like an Ed Wood film.
My daughter's like, oh shit, what do I? Well, he and his wife at the time, Polly Platt, got together, and Whitman was in the news, and they figured, so what if that shooting happens at a drive-in, and they're showing the Karloff movie?
Right.
And so they spun it into this whole thing, and he showed it to Corman, and he said, but here's the thing. I need some new Karloff, too. Like the existing footage isn't enough. I need like 2 more days. And fortunately, Corman liked the script enough. He's like, all right, I'll pay Boris another $2,000 or you can, So in the movie, it's funny. Karloff actually slaps the shooter and gets his hands on him. Says, use it. Oh shit, smacks him. That's the ending.
Have you watched or not watched? Have you listened to The Plot Thickens, the TCM podcast with the whole Bogdanovich? I've been listening to that. That's why it was driving me nuts. I couldn't remember the name of the movie because I was just listening to that podcast.
I love them both, and I hate to say it, but that podcast made me like Bogdanovich and Mankiewicz a little less, I'm afraid.
Really?
Yeah, but Peter, it helped. You should also listen to the You Must Remember This season. That's Polly Platt. Because
that podcast is great.
That will leave you thinking Peter didn't treat Polly Platt very well, and that Peter was one of these many Hollywood men who jumped from one young, beautiful woman to another and screw the consequences to everybody else, And then Mankiewicz playing along with that, and so Mankiewicz is kind of invested in the Orson Welles Mankiewicz argument, because that was his great uncle, I think, maybe. Yeah, but the way he kind of kissed Peter's ass and glossed over a lot of the hurtful stuff he did, and that combined with minimizing Orson's contributions to Kane kind of annoyed me. But that's my own personal axe to
Sure, I can understand.
Mhm.
I mean, Bogdanovich. Listen, I'm not Bogdanovich's therapist or his priest. What he's done to the women in his life, I don't know. I separate that from the films that he makes, but I understand what you mean.
Me too. And by the way, like less means I went from like near worship of Bogdanovich to just simply thinking, oh, he's so great.
Sure.
I still would, if I could have bought him lunch while he was still alive and listen to stories for 3 hours, I'd take that any day of the week.
Right.
I know we're deviating far.
God, we've got Andy and Sal talking about old
Movies.
Hollywood.
Yeah. Well,
Where's
have you?
Barnett? We need Barnett.
Yeah. Right. Have you on Paramount Plus the show? It's a limited series, The Offer. It's about the making.
So it's funny you say that because I'm working on a project with a writer named Ted Sullivan, and he's buddies with one of the guys in The Offer. He may play Coppola. He's kind of he's got a beard.
Yeah, well, there's
actor guys.
Yeah.
And so, based on Ted's recommendation, I got Paramount this very day just so I could watch that damn thing. So I'm excited to see.
It's pretty good. It's pretty fun, and some stuff I didn't really know. But the guy who plays Bob
Evans,
yeah,
is that right?
fucking nails it. I mean, just the voice. He does just enough where it's Robert Evans, but it's not a caricature. And I think he kills it. I was just like,
This documentary is great, by the way. If you got to see the kid stays in the picture. It's
yeah. Evans is a character.
Unless you actually accidentally want to start just talking. Do I want to talk about Robert Evans? Talk like Robert Evans? Yes, I do.
I do want to talk like Robert Evans. I don't know what you mean. I didn't realize, like, he has that mid-Atlantic, he has that fake mid-Atlantic accent,
right?
Like Cary Grant
thing, or the
hello
Hepburn thing.
Did I like the documentary? No. Did I love it? Hell yes,
I did. How do you not fall in love with that though? There's something about that guy. It's just like he's full of shit, but it's just something about him too that I don't know. Yeah. I'm Robert Evans, and this is my story. And he
doesn't gloss over the times he fucked up or the heartbreak, or I love him. Oh, Tom, you're back.
Tom's back. We had a video. We have a video.
My video is freezing.
Oh, he's frozen again.
It's stop animation. We got
Well, Andy, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we let everyone out there know what you're up to these days, how to follow you on the interwebs, all that good stuff.
I'm a big disappointment on that front and it's actually become a thing in my life recently. After Extraction came out, I decided I needed to try to capitalize on that and chase Hollywood money for a few years. So I've got a screenplay I'm revising. I got a TV pitch that I've worked on with some people that I'm revising. The sad news is I've been working, fairly hard, but I got nothing to show for it. I haven't done any comics in a while. And I was kind of down a couple of weeks ago, and I went, I think part of the reason I'm down is that I'm not making anything. So I'm looking for projects. Phil and I may be involved in a Kevin Smith thing again, although it's very slow developing. And I may try to find a graphic novel project I can get going on, because chasing Hollywood money is something I need to do. Because every one of those checks is, compared to comics, is like, oh, especially if you live in the middle of Kansas.
It's frightening.
Whoa, that's an extra zero.
I didn't know that kind of money existed.
Is chasing the money easy? No. Do I love it? Yes.
Let me tell you, kid. You stick with
Hollywood
me.
is very fickle, but when it comes through, it's significant. But yeah, there is part of the reason I got into comics is I wanted to actually make things that can make a little difference in somebody's life.
Yeah.
So I do miss that. So in other words, I'm not hawking anything. I'm not pitching promoting anything. You can find me, because my name is spelled weird, you can find me on social media that way. Just Ande Parks on whatever.
But let me pitch this to you. I got a story about a trucker, and right, Tom? Tom, we got a trucker. We got a whole line of trucker comic books. We want to produce.
Well, trucker comic books and Andy, one of our new bits is that every week we find a public domain superhero.
Six-gun gorilla. It's the story of a gorilla who wants revenge, and he carries a 6-gun.
Speed centaur is a centaur, but faster
than regular centaur.
So the public domain comic characters, what are there certain eras and publishers that they tend to come out of?
It's all old stuff. It's we just go and look online and we find the most ridiculous public domain character, and then
it's like 80% Captain Marvel ripoffs. It's like a guy with a ring,
right?
A guy with a ring that has like 5 gods that show up, or like I have
wisdom.
A belt. Like
he's got smarts, he's got talent, he's
strong. Like shockingly not even attempting to hide at all. Like the Captain Marvel-esque,
He's a newsboy.
Well, Captain Marvel deserved to be ripped off, right? Because according to DC Comics, he was a ripoff.
Yes, yeah, and it's like, our guy's nothing like Captain Marvel. This guy's got a belt, and
he's got 2 lightning belts on his chest, not one.
No one owns Hercules.
Not to get off on a tangent about comics history again, but I think it's in the Stranko history. They talk that Stranko did these great history of comics. There's 2 volumes that really worth seeking out. But he does a whole little chapter about when they did the Mr. Mind. Is that the worm?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they did that whole saga, like this Mr. Mind. They're like, wow, he's pulling all the strings, and it went on for a while. And then they're like, okay, we got to figure this out. We don't know what Mr. Mind is. And they bashed it out, I think, in a weekend. They got a hotel suite, and they got all the guys, and there's like a guy drawing in the bathtub, and they said, somebody said, a worm, he's a worm. They're like, oh shit, that's the craziest thing we ever heard. Let's do it. So he turns into a worm with a speaker around his neck.
Yeah,
it's
great character. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I tell you, I've never seen a worm this exciting and dynamic in my life.
I love that Mr. Mind made it into the movie.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll be a big part of the second one if they ever make it.
Yeah.
Hollywood, the land of dreams. And
what was the DC event that
the ancient Shazam could be Hercules, or it could be Hollywood.
Heartbreak. Hercules or Heartbreak.
Tom, what was the DC event that the big bad ended up being Skeets, but it was Mr. Mind?
It was 52.
It was 52. Okay.
Spoilers if you didn't read that from
Sorry.
I don't know, 15 years ago, I guess.
Yeah. It was Skeets the whole time. Son of a bitch.
That little robot.
It was Mr. Mind inside Skeets.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We had to have Skeets clean. You had to have a clean Skeets. You couldn't just blame it all on it.
Yeah.
All right. Is that kind of our look back on kind of our thoughts on Neal Adams and catching up with our good, but let's not wait for another
the death of another
guy.
Stop killing off comic book creators, Andy, and we'll have you back on.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, guys. Anytime you have an excuse to invite me, please do. I like you guys.
Well,
I love you. I'll say it. I love you.
We're also Andy, Chris and I and Will Pfeiffer, fellow comic book creator.
Don't promote your other podcast with Tom sitting here. That's so rude.
Well, Tom is more than welcome to be a part of it. He doesn't want anything to do with it. Trust me. It's not like it's like
Sunday afternoon. No, I got shit going on, guys.
I like my family.
Yeah.
So what do you guys and Will talk about?
Well, we've been doing K-Billy Super Sounds, which is just a spin-off of this, but we've been talking about all the Quentin Tarantino films one by one, but we're moving on. And once we're finished with Tarantino, we're going to move on, I think, to the Coen brothers. is our next.
My favorites.
Yeah, so if you want to be a part of that, maybe we could.
You should reach out. I can talk about the Coens for a long time.
Well, all right.
It's once a month.
Cool.
Yeah.
We just watch it, and we're gonna try and set up like, I think, where we do a communal live viewing.
Neat.
And so people can listen to us comment as we watch it, and then listen to us, because the people that don't get enough of us.
Of course, yeah. Why not ruin the movie?
It could be fun. I didn't know what venue to do it. I think we ended up doing a Netflix watch party instead of a YouTube thing. But I did one for Extraction. We had like 20 of us just kind of chatting about it while it ran. It was fun.
Yeah, it's not like it's movies people haven't seen, Tom. Come on. They've seen these movies. It's not the first time.
All right, people are into it. I can't stop. I can't stop them.
That's the beauty of podcasting. You can't stop us.
No one can stop you.
I just got my Criterion Blu-ray of Blood Simple. It's delivered last week. So
I just watched it about a month ago.
It's almost 40 years old, Andy.
Crazy.
Oh,
God. It's 38 years old. Blood Simple came out.
I'd forgotten how despicable. I knew Emmett Walsh was just. I'd forgotten Dan Hedaya. How just like horrible.
Was that the PI?
Emmett Walsh is the PI. Dan Hedaya is the husband of.
Oh yeah, the furry guy.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, from Cheers and other stuff. Oh, yeah. It's just despicable.
Oh, that's right. He was Carla's.
Was he the husband before Jay Thomas or after?
Yeah, I think so. That's right.
He's also got a great part in Joe versus a Volcano, which is a movie I think.
All right, save it for the other.
Yes,
podcast.
got it.
Yeah.
Neal, sorry to your memory. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Check that on Patreon. So it's patreon.com/AroundComics. Find more about ACTV and K-Billy Super Sounds. We're gonna come up with a name for the Coen Brothers one. I think we're doing the first 12 movies. Is what we're kind of looking at right now.
Do a year.
They've got like 27 movies. We've been doing it for 2 years.
Wow.
It's a lot more than you can.
Maybe we just cherry pick. We can.
There's 12 are all really good.
Yeah, but there's some later ones that are really good
too.
Yeah.
It's not
the only one I cannot watch is Lady Killers. I can watch.
I like Lady Killers.
The lawyer one I like a lot, and most people don't.
Which one?
Yeah.
Intolerable Cruelty.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I could do without a few of them. There's a few I can do.
Well, you're gonna watch all of them because I know you guys. And
we have nothing better to do on a Sunday.
Yeah,
afternoon.
You'll be like, you'll get through. Like, we got to do all of them. Can't just do some of them.
Tom, I don't like sunshine. Okay, it's just the way it is.
What are you doing today? I'm gonna talk about a movie I don't like for 3 hours.
Listen, my kids are grown. I have nothing to do.
I know. I get it, man. I'll be there in a little while.
Yeah.
By the way, why was I the only one I saw in this episode doing this?
Oh no, I had margarita for Cinco de Mayo.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
I was drinking a Boulevardier.
Nice.
Cervezos.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's Milwaukee Cervezos.
I was just like turning around.
Yeah, I was.
To do it. So.
We're more discreet these days. We're trying to be. We're more upstanding. We're more highbrow now, Andy.
Oh yeah, that's us. Highbrow.
I didn't get the memo.
All right, is that it for this week? I got things to do.
I think that's it. Yeah. So next week we'll be back. We've got a backlog of some awesome comics to talk about. We still haven't talked about Rogues, which I'm really liking. The new Obi-Wan came out this week, and I'm waiting for the TV show. A good Star Wars.
I have a connection to Rogues, which I'll tell you about on some other show.
Oh,
all right. Yeah.
Damn it.
What's good?
I want to know.
So yeah,
you got to come back next week.
That's what they said to me. Every week.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, Tom was our first guest.
Is that right? Oh shit!
No, he wasn't our first guest, but he was he was a guest,
He
certainly
was-
initially.
Yeah, he was a guest. Actually, our very first creator guest was Phil.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yep, he was first guy that was ever like actually gave us his number. It's like, yeah, you can call me. So anyway, we'll be back next week with more new comic talk. Go check out some Neal Adams comics if you haven't before. Some truly great stuff.
Hands and feet.
Hands and feet, dynamic.
Don't show your feet. No showing feet on the internet.
Well, you get that in our Tarantino podcast.
Yeah,
Talk
plenty.
a lot
Oh,
of-
wow.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of feet.
Wow, no shoes Tom over there.
No shoes, baby. Just my,
Man,
just
this
my,
is
just
how-
my-
what is on your socks? French fries? Is that McDonald's
that's
French fries?
French fries and hamburgers.
Oh, love
Hey, if you guys become Patreons, you'll get the sockless version.
That's hot.
That's worth $5 a month alone. All right.
Tom's,
Yeah, check-
toe-
I checked
Tom's
very
toes. Tom's versus socks.
Just out of frame. Barefoot.
We will be back next Thursday. Same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime,
In between toes
he'll be
Ugh.
everywhere in
and around
around
comics.
R.I.P. Neal.
Everywhere and around. Everywhere and around.